Hi, and welcome to Unapologetic Women, a podcast about current affairs, culture, politics, life, and how we got here. Brought to you by Tony and Saoirse. These are unscripted conversations about things we care about, not things we are experts in. Oh, and there's probably going to be a bit of swearing too. Tony!
Hey.
Where are you beaming in from today?
Still fucking It's so depressing when just as you were asking that, I was like, yeah, still in Vancouver. It's been 90 days. It's a long-ass road trip.
That's not even a road trip.
No, it's not actually. It's, I don't know what you call it when your car sits in the driveway. Definitely a staycation.
Saving miles, staycation.
Saving miles. I was going to say saving the environment, but it's an electric car, so no, doing that already. It's been 90 days. It's wild, Saoirse. At this point, I have a feeling that we will have soon spent more time in Canada this year.
Oh my God, yes, of course.
No, don't know why you're excited about that.
No, I'm not, but I just had a realization myself of like, well, because I was chatting with my mum this morning and we were asking like, when do I think I'd be able to come home? And obviously with all of the ridiculous immigration stuff in the US right now, I can't leave. Well, I can leave, but I can't come back. And we were saying that if I'm not able to come home until like Christmas time, it'll be the longest, even though I've lived away from home for 8 years, it'll be the longest time I've ever spent away from my family.
Wait, do you actually think there's a possibility that we can't go back to Europe before Christmas?
Yeah.
That just not crossed my mind. In my mind, I was like, August, September max.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
You look so sad as you said, really. You're like, oh, you poor love. Oh, it hasn't hit you yet. Oh no, that was where my mind was like, okay, it's going to be August, September, but
it's June next week.
I know.
Like, and I don't see him reverting his ban on immigration processing, but yeah, I'm definitely grounding myself in like the earliest being December, and if it is, I'm gonna be home for a month. I'm just gonna come back in January. Like,
this year is just a throwaway year. Didn't you say that to me? Someone said that to me today. It was just like it wasn't you actually. I think it was. I can't remember who it was, but said that this is just a throwaway year between 2 decades. I was like, that feels accurate. It's like the throwaway year before we start a new decade.
Oh my God. I can't believe just the concept of it being a throwaway year. Like, I had such grand plans for 2020 and what it was going to be, and exactly, we all did. Like,
actually, I didn't really. I'm just lying. I didn't have any grand plans.
You did have grand plans. You were living in the beautiful place, and there was exciting jobs and exactly new beginnings. Lemon had a garden.
Lemon's got a garden here in Canada. But we're just waiting on summer. I think I'll tell you that's where my saltiness is coming from this morning. I'm just like looking outside and going, where the hell is summer? Like, I am paying so much rent for my house in San Francisco, and so I believe that I deserve good weather in Canada, which obviously is totally not a thing, and very spoiled, bratish of me. But yeah, I'll be happier when the sun's here. What else is new for you?
What else is new for me? Nothing too crazy. We had the bank holiday weekend here, which was nice, and it was bank holiday as well at home. And I know it's been like 33 degrees Celsius, and people are like slightly dying all around London with the heat. Speaking of England and home, why don't you talk to me about our lovely Dominic Cummings situation that went down this week?
The lovely Dominic Cummings situation. God, that was a story that unraveled so fast. And so it's funny, it was one of those that seemingly could have gone gone under the radar, but I don't know if you're getting this sense, but tensions feel super fucking high right now. And the media is playing into that as well. But Dominic Cummings, we briefly, I think, mentioned him in actually one of our previous episodes talking about the Brexit campaign. He's currently the chief advisor to the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He was also basically the mastermind behind the Vote Leave campaign, so the Brexit campaign that ultimately won. And it just so happens that the Boris Johnson was basically, like many of the European countries, like many of actually the worldwide countries, was telling UK citizens to stay at home, social distance, don't drive, don't go out of your immediate circle of friends and your immediate neighborhood. And it so happens that Dominic Cummings was caught driving 260 miles, about 420 kilometers from London to Durham. And so he did a little round trip for his wife's birthday. And he's basically like, there's just been a massive upheaval of people calling for his resignation from both opposition politicians, members of the government, Conservative Party as well. People are calling on Boris to sack him. And Boris basically has given his blessing that he thinks he did the right thing. There's different versions of the story of why he drove so far. And apparently the big thing also is that he was symptomatic. So he was also ill and he was worried of trying to take care of his youngest kid if both him and his wife were sick. So they wanted to go where they'd be family members. But there's the irony there of, wait, so the anger that is felt from the British people is very much, so wait, so the rules apply to everyone but not to certain people, or not to the immediate entourage of Boris Johnson. And you just can't rule like that. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that also with Trump, although maybe not so much, but it is that do as I say, not as I do. And I think people are pissed that they've been, and rightly so. We had this conversation actually yesterday at our happy hour. It's like, it's a really tricky time, I think, right now for people to be receiving orders, having to obey by these orders, and then seeing the people who are putting these orders, the public actually just disobeying them and candidly disobeying them.
And I think of the New York Times Sunday front cover. For those of you listening, it was the names of the 100,000 people that have died from COVID-19 and the sharp contrast of Donald Trump playing golf without a mask in Florida on the same day. And it just, for me anyway, it really just hit a chord of 100,000 people have just died. Like,
what is it going to take for you to take this seriously?
How do you, and instead it's a flurry of tweets about Obamagate and
what is
Sleepy
that, by the
Joe.
Way? What is the genesis of the Obamagate?
The genesis of the Obama. So basically they're saying that Obama, and when I say there, Donald Trump has manifested, as he is calling it, the worst political scandal in history of the US. But he is saying that Obama and Biden as VP and the administration knew and about an active FBI investigation and requested investigations take place without telling the public. Like, it's all a bit hodgepodge and random facts put together, but it's not the thing that you should be focusing on or talking about when you then are saying every state is seeing a decrease in death toll, and every state is going to go back to normal, and we're going to open this up fully. Look at Georgia, look at Florida, how great this is. And look, maybe there's an essence of truth to that, and people can start to get back to some sense of normality. But these past 3 months, he has not been a leader that I would have looked to as a trustworthy source.
Yeah. It's hard to not make light of it or joke about just trying to listen to the press briefings. And I say try because I really haven't been able to get through one for one, but the daily press briefings of Joan going, this can't be it. And then to a lesser extent, you look across the pond to the UK and you hear Boris Johnson's reaction to, the uproar around Dominic Cummings breaking this and calling for him to be sacked, which I actually think people are more pissed about the fact that what he did with Brexit. And like, this is a second wave of now's an opportunity to sack the guy, which is leading on to like the piling on. But Boris Johnson responded to that by saying, he has my backing. He was just following the instincts of every father. And I think that sentence really kicked it off for people, because let's talk about following our instincts. Actually, we've been doing the complete opposites of human beings. So you hear stories of people saying, my mum died alone in a care facility because I was told to not follow my instincts to go and be there with her. But I was told that for the public good and safety, I could not leave my home. I'm sorry, what? So now it's okay to follow our instincts? There's something there that's just gut punching.
I've got to share a good COVID story. My dear friend at home, her nan, late 80s, I think 87, was diagnosed with COVID last week or the week before in a care home, and then got put into palliative care, end of life care, and made a miraculous recovery on Saturday, is off life support medication, has like beat it, and is coming through the other side.
That's incredible.
Like, and it was just before, on Saturday, we all went into a virtual hen do. And it was just before we went into that Katie got the news, and it was just
that's amazing.
Like tears of joy. Like 86-year-old woman, the odds were against her in every way, shape, or form, and to come out the other side, like there is some good happening.
It's interesting. I don't know why this brings up this for me, but I guess it's because she sounds like a strong ass woman. But I've been reading about, as I think many of us have, like what this pandemic is changing, what it's shaping from the remote, the company perspective, jobs, media, you name it. But one of the things that is coming up bit by bit of what the crisis is shaping a little bit is just like us rethinking how things get done and what it takes to get things done. Hence, thinking about this badass, strong woman who's recovering is like things that are coming up are like, vulnerability, empathy. As a leader, you talking about, looking at Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, this is not leadership that we're expecting. And we look at New Zealand with someone like Jacinda Ardern and Germany's Angela Merkel, and they just went about it very, very differently. This wasn't about waging war against an invisible enemy. This was very much about, okay, this is a shared problem, shared responsibility, shared solutions. What is this going to take? Swift actions and a huge dose of vulnerability. And I don't know, there's something there for me that is exciting of, is this going to show that there are different ways to go into crisis management mode and do it the way that some women can show their strengths?
I'll give you 5. What are the 5 core strengths to you of a leader?
Like,
and sorry, this is completely unprompted, but what you're just saying there, Tony, like I know everyone's going to have a different and unique experience with that, but there are core skill sets that I believe you have to have as a leader, and I'd love to know what yours are.
I coined a word the other day. I think I coined a word the other day that I need to find, and I dumped it on my desktop somewhere. Stealth leadership. There you go. Oh my God, I found it. God, I'm good. Stealth leadership. And I cannot remember for the life of me on what call I was on that I came up with this. But the idea behind stealth leadership is the complete absolute opposite of what you think leadership needs to look like. I don't need someone to look the part. I don't need someone to look big and busty and manly and can go to war. And even the word manly just pisses me off, but someone that looks strong. And so the whole idea of stealth leadership also is just don't say that you're a leader. You don't have to say it. You don't have to remind people. If you are truly a leader, it's just going to fall into place and people are naturally going to follow in your footsteps. If you're doing the right things, if you're actually actively listening, if you're putting yourself out there, if you're being vulnerable, if you're being honest, if you're leading by example, if you're making people feel safe and feel heard and feel understood, that's the fucking kind of stealth leadership that I want to be a part of. where you don't have to remind people of the fact that you are their leader. And that came up very much in a world of, and I think we've messed up a lot of people this way, of thinking that your career progression is going to have to be junior exec, you then become an account executive, and there's different terms for different varieties, but then at some point it's become a manager. And so it's like kind of this thing that to become a manager, it's like means that you've made it. It means that you're a leader. And I just always have this knee-jerk reaction with this, of it takes such a special skill set to want to manage people. And for me, one of those skill sets is you have to be a stealth leader. And what I mean by that is just lead by fucking example. Don't ask for anyone to follow in your footsteps. You are doing the right things on a daily basis that people are going to look to that and go, oh my God, that's what I want to be doing. Oh my God, that's how I want to make people feel. I want to have that reaction when people walk in the room. I want other people to have that reaction when I walk in the room. That you just see it. You see it when someone walks in the room and everyone's shoulders just drop and everyone feels comfortable and people start laughing. You see the opposite of a bad leader. Someone will walk into the room and silence happens and everyone starts looking down and everyone gets a little nervous and everyone gets like, So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but I think the traits are things like vulnerability. I'm going to put stealth leadership in there, but putting yourself out there. Listening is one of my big ones. I said that to someone the other day. Of this person was asking me how do I make it that these 9 people follow in my footsteps? How do I make it that these 9 people get on board with my project? And I said, I think you open it up and ask them to talk and ask them why they're on the call in the first place. Ask them why they're here. Ask them what they're excited about. And you speak last. And it was so hard for that person to do that he opened up and said, tried to like facilitate the want to hear from you. There was honestly 3 seconds of silence, Sorsha, and then he went straight into his thing because the silence was just so uncomfortable.
Oh, it's so fascinating that like I used to be very uncomfortable with silence. It used to drive me insane, and I'd want to figure out how to fill the void. And over the many years of being trained in in the practice of facilitation, have become significantly more comfortable with it. But you can always see when you're in a room or you're in a meeting, virtually these days, where silence comes and that level of uncomfort of like, oh, anyone say something, like,
no,
it's so funny. Like, and honestly, in those, especially in that, what the example you're describing there, that silence is a moment of maybe reflection, maybe gathering your thoughts to be able to be fully present in that particular conversation, right? Like there are very logical reasons for why there is a moment of silence in a conversation. And it also, we think about this from a conflict perspective, a moment of silence can allow you to actively hear what the other person is saying without reacting in an emotional and a visceral way that may happen, especially if you're looking at it from a kind of both sides of the aisle politically conversation. That moment of silence is necessary to be able to come to an actual conversation, as opposed to just not being able to hear each other.
Ooh, it's interesting that you said an actual conversation. What prompted me, I was like, dialogue. Like what you were talking, I was like, dialogue. And in a business setting, it's specifically because we've been taught time and time again that you have to come with answers to everything. So I think we've kind of been brainwashed that if you come to a table, if you come to a brainstorming session, I know we always say there's no stupid questions, no stupid ideas, throw them all there. But actually that's not true. We're prompted to always arrive with an answer to something. So open dialogue, open questions, like open spaces where you can actually sit in silence and go, wait, hold on a minute. I'm going to need a minute to digest that. I don't have an answer for you right now. Just hold it. Take your time. We don't invite that. Corporate America, corporate Europe doesn't invite that. It's like, quick, let's not waste anyone's time. So if we're going to do a brainstorming session, most brainstorming sessions, people talking on top of each other. There's no time to digest what you were just saying, like to actually have a conversation and a dialogue.
Well, and especially if you put it in a business setting, that fear that, and if we think back to what you described in terms of like that leadership skill set, like the authoritative, when someone comes in a room, people like look down, shoulders are down. Like that authoritative leadership style makes people terrified of saying, oh, actually, I don't really understand that. Or can you explain that a little bit more? Or why? Questioning, right? The questioning of why are we doing this? Is this the right track? Is this the right path? Like maybe I have a different suggestion. Like, can that be heard? And in an authoritative leadership style, that there is no air for that. There's no room for it. But that for me has been a leadership style that I've seen and grown up with, especially in the business industry. And it stems a lot from men in leadership positions who hold that type of authority over whatever it is that's happening. And that is not to say that all men lead like that, but just from my experience in the business world in particular, and my business world collides very tightly with politics. And hey, no shit, Sherlock, 80% of elected officials in this country are men. Like there's something there with the authoritative style of leadership and how that then impacts decisions in the way that people are able to engage in dialogue.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I think I go back to Liz Plank's book, For the Love of Men, which always cracks me up as a title of a book, but brilliant book of like creating empathy for those men who've been taught, which more so than women, you should always have an answer. Like always step up, be the man. Like those are all things that you hear, but they've also been trained that you always better have a fucking answer to that. Don't look like a moron. Don't look like an idiot, which I don't think over time that has shifted, but the expectations for women to always have an answer to everything was less so, which actually I think gave us a little bit of breathing room to go, you know what? I don't know, but that doesn't fall as harshly as a guy saying that, because the expectation of the woman anyway is that she doesn't have an answer to that. I found that in a business setting also, that when I ask follow-up questions, it's deemed cute. It's like, oh, sweet. So I play on that. But it's less abrasive and aggressive than when a guy says, I'm sorry, I just have a follow-up question on that. So why would you do, okay, and so why would you, whereas when I do it, it's like, oh, okay, I get this a lot, because I'm often asking this of middle-aged men who find it endearing that someone would want to know more from them. That's how they've portrayed it. Whereas I'm not putting it in that way. I'm putting it as, I still don't understand what you're getting to. And so I'm going to keep on digging and asking, but I come across less abrasive, or maybe less condescending, or maybe less trying to poke at something. I just come across as like a ditzy woman asking another question because she doesn't get it. And so over the years, I've learned to actually, which is really sad, but I've learned to play on that of, I can actually get away with asking way more questions than some dudes. I'm also completely underestimated in a room as well, which I've learned to play to that advantage as well, as people expect so little of me. Just breaks my heart every time I say those words, but it's so fucking true. In my experience anyway, it's been so true. That even if I do 80% of what I'm capable of, people go, oh my God, that's bloody brilliant. I'm like, wait till you see the other 20% that I slap on top of that and I'll really blow you away. But it's sad that that's not expected of me from the get-go.
Just by what you look like.
Just by what you look like.
And there's so many different types of discrimination like that in the workplace. I was on a call last week with someone in the financial sector chatting through, and he made a recommendation of someone for me to engage with on a separate but tangentially related project. And he's like, just so you know, he is young, but like he's amazing at what he does, and like he puts in 110%, but he's always questioned when he walks into the room because he's young. And I was like, how old? Like the way he was described, I was like, how old is he? He's like, he's 27. And I was like, okay, it's okay. Like a 27-year-old, I have the same expectation of them as I do a 45-year-old or a 50. Like it doesn't matter, that ageism piece. And when I think about, especially in the political sphere, of young people coming up and figuring out, maybe I want to be a campaign manager, maybe I want to be a general consultant, and what are those like prongs that you can tap into in leadership at those, like the top level of campaign, is what people are looking to understand, okay, how do I, if I want to be a campaign manager, what skills am I going to learn from this individual whose leadership style I'm looking at as a beacon of what I want to be and how I want to be when I grow up, right? If you look at it in that lens. And unfortunately, again, in the political sphere, not a lot of those leaders are women. And so your people are inherently taught these leadership skill sets that for me aren't necessarily the best way to do it. And if we need more women to be able to for young people to look at and say, oh, I didn't realize that you could lead in a way that is actually facilitative, or you walk into a room and it's a democratic process of leadership where you ask questions and you get a consensus of a group. And if there isn't a consensus, you as the leader make that executive decision, but with informed information.
So important. It's also so important in that we're so individually different that I think we've probably seen a lot of failed leaders trying to mimic someone else's leadership style and not realizing that there are a plethora of different ways in which they can step up and lead in their own way and actually be brilliant at it. Whereas when you're trying to mimic, and I think we saw again a lot of this with women thinking, and I have deep, deep empathy for women who are probably now in their 50s or 60s who were told there's only room for one woman. So, and be part of the boys club and make sure that you're not too womanly. And so that they've had to adopt like that sort of more male dominant leadership style. Us having this conversation, have you watched, Saoirse, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan?
No, I've heard amazing things about it, but I haven't.
Definitely watch it. And anyone who hasn't watched it yet, it really is the best piece of content that's been put out there recently for myriad of reasons. I put it up there with like the Hillary documentary. It's incredibly well filmed, incredibly well edited and put together. It is clearly an ode to Michael Jordan, but not like through tinted rose glasses. Like, it gets very real. And there's now a lot of essays of, would Michael Jordan's leadership style have been tolerated and accepted today in today's world? It got me thinking about his leadership style because it is very unique. It's very abrasive. But everyone on his team would say, oh, he was not liked, but also deeply fucking respected. And we got to where we are because of him. And he pulled us all up and he made us all better. And you got this incredible tension. But I love this piece of, would that be acceptable today? Would that leadership style have worked or even be allowed or tolerated?
But when you say, Tony, not everyone liked him, but there was a deep respect, that to me is a skill. That is a serious, serious skill. The ability to be able to go into a room and know that you're going to walk out and people are going to be like, oh my God, them again, right? But know that you're able to achieve whatever your end goal is, whatever your metric is, because of your leadership style. It's actually a really powerful, one of the skills that I put up top of, like, being able to just walk away and know that not everyone in the room is going to like you, and be okay with that and not let it impact your judgment and your decision making.
And I think he said, he's like, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to fucking win. But what stuck me with that is, look, it worked for him. Like, don't try. And it's why I loved your question about, like, and I want to hear your answers. Like, what are those leadership skill sets that you need? I also loathe those pieces of, here are the 5 skills that you need to succeed, because that one skill might work for one human being because of who they are, because they're deeply empathetic, because they can go there with you, and would just come across as fake as hell on someone else, where it's like, I know you don't care, so stop pretending. Or I know you don't want to be vulnerable, so please stop. Do something else. But I'm curious, Saoirse, what are yours? Like,
It's really funny that you framed it like that, because my number one skill of leaders that I respect around the world is the ability to tell your own story. That is, if you can't share your own why, your own how, your own version of that story, I personally can't respect you as a leader. I just can't. I need to know who you are. And there are people that you and I have worked with in the past that deeply struggled with that I just couldn't respect because of that. And I've had that in professional life. I've had that in my personal life. So yeah, my number one skill set of a leader is the ability to share your own story.
Say a little bit more about, because I know that this is a thing that we use constantly, like the sharing your own story. Like, what is it? What isn't it? What does that look like? What does that not look like for you?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. It's been a part of my life since I moved to America. It was amplified when I started working with Nation Builder with a practice that we have at the company of story circles as a premise to get to know and understand each other. But where I first got introduced to it was through Marshall Gantz's Self, Us, and Now story narrative construct, which was Obama's like organizing model around the story of self, us, and now. And I always looked at it from a political lens. So when I do trainings on how to run for office, the first like module in a how to run for office training that will be taught by me is how do you tell your story? Because if you don't have a story, you aren't going to be able to garnish people to come and be invested in what you're doing. And that works for me. That works exactly the same way. If you're selling a product, if you're trying to build a business, or if you're running for office, if you don't have a narrative that people can gather into and say like, oh, that resonates with me personally, or I've had a similar experience to that, or, oh my God, I have such empathy for this individual based on their narrative, their story, who they are. Like to me, it all crumbles if you don't have that, because the other skills, like you say, will vary, right? People who are naturally empathetic, who are naturally able to show humility, those skills will vary person to person and personality type. But that inherent ability to share who you are and be comfortable with whatever that story is. And that story is never going to be like, I was born here and then I went here. Like, it's not that. It's the why. Why does that matter? Like, why is that a thing that you're going to share and bring to the table? If someone asks you the question, who are you? Or how did you get here? That answer is going to be different every day. But there will be thematics within your story that will come true no matter what day it is that you tell it. And so that for me is like the number one thing, and the ability for any leader. I have no idea who Donald Trump is. I have no idea. I don't know his story. I have no idea who he is. You know what I mean? Like if I put it in that lens.
Oh yeah, no, it's wild. No idea. Let me play devil's ad. I agree with that. Like I've seen it happen. You and I, our whole relationship, I think is also built bit by bit of telling pieces of our story. Like it's interesting that I don't think I've maybe, I mean, and this is true in that a lot of the friendships that I still have today are friendships that I built when I was 16, 17. Those are my closest friendships. So obviously they were built on a different time in life with a different context. But I think you are one of the few friendships that I have where we invest in, this is going to come out really weird, but we invest in ourselves and talk about ourselves 90% of the time. Very rarely are our conversations about other people. You and I, it's always been about where are you at today? How's it happening for you? What are you doing? Blah, blah. And we spend 90 or 95% of our times talking, it's going to sound really weird, talking about ourselves versus anyone else. And I think that's because you and I have gone through that journey of the importance of opening up and telling our stories.
But that is intentional. And like, I know what you say around like, you know, the friends you've had for 20, 25 years, right? It's a very different model than adult friends, we'll call it. It's different. Relationship has blossomed into many things, but like it's built around thematics and things that impact us directly, right? Like I don't get on a call here and be like, oh my God, 25,000 things have happened and I'm going to give you the landscape. No, I'll give you the 4 things that like I have some personal resignation with so that I can then share that to you personally rather than being abstract about what's happening. Like that's how I've always grounded with you and I.
So the question that I had for you around taking this into like a business perspective, or someone listening to you saying the number one thing for me is being able to tell your story. How the hell do you expect me to be open and vulnerable in a work setting when I was in that setting previously where we would always be told separate life and business? Are there any tips and tricks? Sounds meek, but are there any like good suggestions that you can give for people who might listen to this and think, oh my God, that is a thing that I definitely want to try, but I've never dared to do it?
The safety of environment is actually really, really important. And I would never, ever recommend that someone just decide to be raw, for lack of a better word, in an environment that they don't feel safe in. It's really, really important to know that you're safe and you're held is kind of the verbiage that's used. The honest thing I would say to that, Tony, is if you're yearning for that, seek it out. That, like, I also came from a world of you show up as the person who you were expected to be, not the person who you are. And I, as an individual, struggled with that. And by being there for a year, all of a sudden it was normal that Saoirse was the loud and boisterous and enter in adjective here, which wasn't normal with how other senior associates would operate, right? Like, it was, I proud myself on the fact that I would do that, but it is not, I'm a very outgoing person. That's who I am. And so for me, be it like, I always showed up as my whole self, but I'm also cognizant to not be abrasive, I guess is the right word. Like, when I'm in a setting where I know it's not appropriate for me to decide to share with everyone that I wax my armpit, as a ridiculous example, but I now am in a company where it actually is appropriate for me in a personal check-in at the top of a meeting to be like, I waxed my armpit and it really hurt. Right? Like,
and that's why I can't be present. And I'm sunburned at the same time.
I'm sunburned. I'm entering thing here, or a very serious thing, right? My mom is sick in hospital. Like, I'm not fit. I'm not able to be mentally present here. And know your audience and know the ability to be able to be agile and say, like, okay, I'm going to bring 20% of who I am to this meeting, or I'm going to bring 80% of who I am to this other meeting because I feel safe in this environment. And if there's nowhere in your workplace that you feel safe to do that, I would highly recommend seeking that out in other areas of your life. Right now, it's a turbulent time. Maybe don't go and look for new employment, but seek it out in other areas of your life. Find different pockets of community that can actually be there with you in whatever way you want to show up and practice and learn how to share your story.
It's interesting you say the seeking it out, because I experienced this firsthand of going, okay, I wanna build that relationship with coworkers and managers or bosses or whatever, and it is, and I'd forgotten just how humbling and scary it is to bring the 20, 40, 50% of your real self, when you know that for the first 4 or 5 times you do that, when you open up, share something and saying, how are you doing? You're going to get the slap reaction of, I'm fine, doing great, everything's lovely. And you're like, just bared my soul here, even if it's just 40%. And God, that fucking hurts. Like, I had that, and I was like, I had that recently, and I was like, oh, that's painful. That is actually really, really painful. But that's the only way to do it, is you keep, because what happens is, I think bit by bit, it chips at other people that you can only fake it for so long. And so I would add to that advice that you have of just like, keep at it if you're adamant, like only put out there what you're comfortable with, but keep at it, because it's a slow winning game.
The one other thing I'll add on that, Tony, it's not for everyone.
True.
There are some people who just do not and will not engage with that in a professional setting. And that's okay, because that's how they want to show up. And so you also have to be mindful of that and respectful and meet people where they're at. Like, that's a thing to be cognizant of. And for me is a constant reminder, because as I hope y'all, as you're listening, get to know our personalities, like, I am someone who regularly seeks and digs and wants people to share their all and everything. And it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. So I have to be clocking that of like, hone that in, right? Like, this person clearly doesn't want to do it. So definitely try it, but like, and be respectful.
Do it with the expectation. I mean, there's a very stupid quote I'm going to botch, but it's one of those, if you want to be happy, have zero expectation of others, which I kind of hate and loathe. You know, I hate it and I like it at the same time, because it's a sad way to live your life of having no expectations of others. But it is true. Like, don't do it with the expectation of, hey, I bared my soul, I need something in return. Like, if you're going to do that, let's not do it. Let's end on that cheesy quote. Do you have anything to add to that? That was useful. I mean,
no, I think, we came into this conversation of like, hey, let's just have a chat. And we just had a really fantastic chat about leadership.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for sticking with us until the end. Welcome to all of the new people. Hope you enjoyed your first episode. You can always get all of the episodes at www.unapologeticwomen.co, or you can also follow us on Instagram, and you can find all of these on all of the places you would normally get your episodes. Thank you, and talk to you next week.